Hey, what's going on, guys? It's Vinny here, and today I'm going to show you how to do an oil change on a 2017 to 2022 Honda CRV. So this job's going to relate and be pretty similar to many other Hondas that are out there on the road today. All right, and then for the tools and the parts, we're going to start with the Honda OEM oil filter. I always recommend using the OEM Honda oil filters. These are the best ones and they're specifically designed for the vehicle. And you're also going to want to get a new crush washer. For the oil, we have 0W20 full synthetic oil filter pliers, 1/2-inch breaker bar with a 17mm socket for the oil drain plug, a Phillips head and a flathead screwdriver to remove the undercarriage splash shield, rubber gloves, oil rags. You're going to also need an oil funnel and an oil drain pan. And then depending on how you're going to do this, you have a couple options as far as jacking the car up. If you're going to be on a flat ground, you can use a car jack with jack stands, or optionally you can use a pair of car ramps. And then you're also going to want a wheel chock or wheel blocks for the back wheels to prevent the car from rolling. And then the last thing over here is just a pad to kneel or lay on as we are under the vehicle. You guys will be able to find links in the description for everything you see in this video. I also want to quickly mention, if you decide to use ramps, you may need 2x4 blocks of wood at the bottom here so you can get the car all the way up the ramps without hitting the bumper on the ramps. All right, so before we start this job, I just like to note down the mileage of the vehicle. You'll be able to note the maintenance codes right here, and I'll put what all of those mean down in the description below. All right, so I laid some blocks of wood at the base of those ramps, which should help make the bumper have enough clearance to get all the way up onto the ramps. Next, it's just a good idea to let the engine run for a little while to warm the oil up. Now is also a great time to get your wheel blocks and kick those like that right behind the back tires. I like to do one on each side just as an extra safety precaution. All right, and then what you're gonna wanna do is look down here for this switch. That's your parking brake. You're gonna pull that up, and then you're gonna listen for the noise of the parking brake engaging. Once you hear that noise and you look down here, you'll see the brake light is on. That's your parking brake, so now you should be good. And then we can go ahead and shut the engine off. And then looking right down here is where you can pop your hood. So we're gonna pull that latch. Now we can come over to the front of the vehicle, and you're gonna reach right under here, and there's a little latch. You're gonna push that to the right side or towards the driver's side of the car. And you can lift your hood up. Grab our hood prop. Prop the hood right up here, you'll see the arrow. All right, so I already checked the oil level before I actually started this video when we were on a level surface, so that is the normal way you would do it, but I am just gonna go ahead and show you again how to do it now. All right, so looking down over here, this is your oil cap. You're gonna twist that off. Sometimes it is pretty tight, and we're gonna sit this out of the way where we're not gonna lose it. And then looking right down here, you'll see this little orange handle. That's your oil dipstick. We can pull that out and we can check our oil, which I've already done when the car was on a level surface. So I'm just gonna sit this back on there. Next, I like to slide everything under the vehicle that we're gonna be using, which is our oil pan, our oil filter pliers, our 17mm socket, and our Phillips head and flathead screwdrivers can go down there, as well as our pad. So we're gonna begin with removing this metal splash shield. All right, so once you're under the vehicle, you see this metal splash shield. There's gonna be a few Phillips head screws and flathead screws that actually hold in this metal splash shield. Sometimes they're really tight to get off if they haven't been off in a minute. All right, so this Phillips head in the back's pretty tight. We can use some type of power lube or WD-40. I'm gonna just try an impact gun. And if you decide to do this, you're gonna wanna make sure you put a lot of pressure up on that screw as you're gonna impact this off, because you don't wanna strip the threads. There you go. And that one came out pretty good. So yeah, it just looks like there's two Phillips heads in the front, one directly in the center in the back. And then for the flatheads, these are just like a quarter turn. So you're gonna put the flathead in there, turn it a quarter or 90 degrees, and then they'll pop right out. Make sure you don't lose them. And then once you have all the screws out, you're gonna grab the splash shield and push it towards the back of the vehicle. which will disengage that, and we can just lay it off to the side. All right, and then with the metal splash guard removed, we can look under here. You see the blue oil filter, and right over here, you'll see it says engine oil. Right here is the 17mm drain bolt. All right, so we have our oil drain pan right here. You're gonna loosen this 17mm drain bolt. Now, when you go to do this, you're gonna wanna try to aim the oil pan as best as you can. I also can say that it sometimes helps to sit something under the oil pan to raise it up a little bit, because this oil is gonna pour out pretty quick and it can start splashing everywhere. So we'll get our 17mm on there, and I'm just gonna bang on this to crack it loose. Just like that. And of course, it'll be handy to have some rags. So I'm gonna actually hold the oil pan up to here and then loosen this. And right as we get to the end, I'm gonna pull the drain plug away really quickly. Just like that. And then slowly lower your oil pan down, let that oil drain. I always like to inspect our oil drain plug. You're gonna see the crush washer here. And then I just move the drain pan around to where it's going to be needed so the oil doesn't spill. So we're going to remove this oil drain plug washer, and you can kind of see that it creates a lip once this gets crushed. These are always a one-time use for these. That's why they always recommend to replace them. Now, if you're in a pinch and you do not have another one, then what you can do temporarily is keep it on the same way you had it and just try to snug that back up. But I would always recommend trying to replace these, as it'll prevent any leaks or issues in the future. All right, so now's a good time for us to replace this drain washer. So here's our new drain washer. You're gonna see there's two kind of different sides to it. The flush side that looks like a more solid metal, I always put against the bolt. So then the crush part will go against the drain pan up here. And always make sure that that's wiped clean. And now that you see the oil's pretty much done draining, I'm gonna put that back in. Always start these and put them in by hand. Wipe it all down. The torque spec for the 17mm drain bolt is 30 foot-pounds. And the torque spec for these oil filters is typically as tight as you can by hand. And then we're going to just snug this up. Just like that. You don't want to go too much. They don't need to be crushed tight, because you can strip these out. And we can move over to the oil filter. All right, next we're going to remove this oil filter here. So I like to get my oil filter pliers on there, just around the side. I squeeze them, and then it's going to be like lefty loosey. So you're going to see it spin like that. And we can remove our pliers out of the way. Again, it's good to have a rag handy here. And we're going to slowly unscrew this. You're going to see it drip out. Try to aim your drain pan. You can let that drain for a little bit. It'll cause a little bit less of a mess. And then once it stops dripping that much, you can start to unscrew it slowly and keep your hand on it, because it's going to eventually come off those threads. You'll feel it start to get really loose. And then I'm going to put it right into the drain pan. Now we're just going to let the rest of the oil drain out of there. All right, and in the meantime, we can open our new filter. Now, I read something online, it's not recommended to poke the hole with your finger, because you can actually make plastic get stuck inside the filter, which will cause issues. So if you can, try to peel away the plastic from the side. That's just a little safer way of doing it. The part number for the oil filter is right here. And again, I'll also have links down in the description for all the tools and parts used in this video. Okay, and then once it stops dripping, I get my rag and I wipe everything down. I'm gonna make sure there's no residual oil anywhere. All right, now this part is optional, but I like to fill the oil filter up with some oil before we reinstall it, so you don't have what's called a dry start. Now, this is just an optional thing. It is said to be a little bit better for the engine, but if you do not want to do this, you do not have to. So what I'm gonna do is take this other funnel that's a little smaller and stick it in here. So I'm just gonna sit this on the rag and just add a little bit of oil at a time. You're going to see the oil filter takes a minute to allow the oil to sink in there. So you just don't want to overfill it. And then you're going to also want to get some fresh oil on your finger and make sure that rubber O-ring is lubed around the edges. You can also get your old oil filter and just make sure that that rubber ring is still on the old oil filter, because sometimes these can stick up onto where the oil filter mounts to. All right, we're going to wipe this down one more time. You can also use some brake cleaner in there once the oil filter is back on. We're going to take our oil filter, which does have oil in it, gently gently start to screw that on, you'll feel the threads start to go on smoothly. You do not want to force this on, so if the threads aren't lined up and it starts out really tight, then do not force it on. Then you can actually spin this counterclockwise to make sure the threads lock in correctly first, and then clockwise to then tighten it. And now I'm going to use a rag since there's a little bit of excess oil on there. Make sure you wipe that off all really good. I'll get the rag and go all the way around the oil filter to make sure there's no extra oil on it. Now would be a great time if you have brake cleaner to spray that everywhere on here and wipe any extra excess oil off. That would also help you get a better grip on the oil filter to make sure it's tight. You're going to tighten this as much as you can by hand. And that looks like it's pretty good. Also check up here if there's any oil that may have splashed. All right, once you've double checked that you've tightened your oil drain plug as well as your oil filter, we can remove everything out from under the car, and we're gonna go up top and fill this engine up with some oil. All right, so this specific Honda CRV is a 1.5 liter 4-cylinder engine, which calls for 3.7 quarts of oil with the filter. Now, if this was the same vehicle, but a hybrid, which I believe those are 2.0 liter 4-cylinder hybrids, those actually call for 4 quarts of oil with the filter. And if you're unsure of what size engine you have, you can look up under the hood up here, and it should say 1.5 liter right there. Also, on the other side of the cap, you'll be able to see it says 0W20, and these typically recommend full synthetic. Here is our engine oil. We have the 0W20 full synthetic, and on the sides of these bottles you'll actually see that there's a clear slit right here, and it will show you that there's liters on the left and quarts on the right. And like I said, this car takes 3.7 quarts with the filter, so you can measure 1, 2, 3, and then 0.7 would be about right here, just under that 4 line, because this is a 5-quart jug of oil. So I always like to get my oil funnel and a clean rag and just make sure you wipe any dust or dirt that's out inside of it before we use it. And then we're going to stick that right in the back here where our oil cap goes. Have a rag handy nearby, and then we can slowly start to fill this oil up. Oh, dripped a little bit. And then I like to stop like about halfway and just double check my line on the oil jug to see where we're at. All right, and then once you believe you have the 3.7 quarts of oil in there, we're gonna take our dipstick out and we're gonna clean it so I can show you that there is these 2 little dots on the actual oil dipstick. There's the low and the high. Some people like to fill it into the middle. I typically like to get it right to the bottom of this top line. And once we start this engine and let it run for a moment, we're gonna check for some leaks. And then once the car's backed up off the ramps and it's on a level surface, we can then go ahead and actually check our oil level. We're gonna put that back. We're gonna take our oil funnel out with a rag, and you can get your oil cap and you can actually wipe this rubber ring around here that actually collects some debris on it over time. And you might wanna rub some just clean oil on there, just a little bit, so it doesn't stick for the next time that you have to take this oil cap off. And just hand tight like that should be good. We can remove our oily gloves, and now we are going to start the engine. All right, we're gonna let this run for a few minutes and then we're gonna shut it off, crawl back under, and check for any leaks. All right, so I let the car run for a few minutes. I just shut it off, and we're just gonna look around the drain bolt here. You're gonna wanna check around your oil filter, and then if you spilled any oil up top when you were filling it, make sure you check around the subframe and everything else. Make sure that's all wiped down and clean. But down here looks bone dry, everything looks good. So now we can go ahead and reinstall our splash shield. All right, so we have our splash shield. You're gonna see that this part of the metal on both ends towards the front of the vehicle go under this plastic here. And then on the passenger side vehicle of this splash shield, there's this square box, and there's an actual clip that's right here in the plastic that's gonna slide in. So we're gonna slide it towards the front of the vehicle, line our holes up, and you can see that clip right in the back, that's in. And now everything else, all the holes look lined up. So then we can go ahead and put our flathead screws in first. And just remember that these are a 1/4 turn. They're just gonna turn like that, like a 90-degree turn, and you'll feel them lock in. And some of these screws are actually missing on this one, but we'll put our Phillips head directly in the center in the back. Could put a little bit of anti-seize on there if you would like. You don't have to crank them too hard, especially if you're the one that's doing the next oil change on this. And then we got one up here in the front, and there should be another one in the front, but that one was missing when we started. All right, now's a good time to remove everything out from under the vehicle. We are now ready to lower the vehicle down to the ground. So we are going to remove the wheel blocks. And here's just a close-up of the wood that I used against these ramps to protect the front bumper from scraping on the ramp. If you have a friend that can stand there and watch the bumper as you back up, that would be ideal. Otherwise, you could try to use a mirror or just go very slowly and listen for any noises. And if you hear anything, stop immediately and double check. All right, you're good to press the brake pedal in and start the vehicle up. And now we're going to press down this parking brake button, and you'll hear it disengage, and you'll also watch that brake light go out. Just like that. Now we're ready to back the vehicle off the ramps. I like to hang out and listen as I back up, so I make sure I'm not messing the bumper up in the front. We're gonna go very slowly. Just like that. All right, now with the car back down on the ground on a level surface, we can go ahead and double check our oil dipstick to ensure the level is correct. So I always take it out once, clean it, put it back, pull it back out. And we're looking at our level. Looks like it is right under the top notch on the oil dipstick. Now, for whatever reason, if it's not around that area, then you can go ahead and add more oil as needed. Now we can reinstall our oil dipstick. Make sure everything's wiped down and clean. Then we can go ahead and lower the hood. All right, now we're gonna reset our oil maintenance light. So we're going to start the vehicle up. Once the car's started up, you're gonna wanna let your screen right here load. All right, we're gonna click home. Then you're gonna wanna go to your settings. Click on vehicle. Then you're gonna scroll down to maintenance info. And here you'll be able to see what the maintenance code was and what each one of those numbers means. We're going to click select reset items. And then we're gonna click oil and filter because that's what we just replaced. And then you're gonna click reset. And just like that, that is how you reset your oil maintenance light. I also just want to quickly mention, please always dispose of your oil correctly. What I usually do is I'll empty this drain pan into one of these big jugs, and you can bring it to a shop somewhere local near you, and they should be able to take this and dispose of it correctly. I've also heard online you could take your old oil filters and poke a hole in the center of it and allow it to drain for a little over 24 hours, and then it's considered a dry filter where you could throw that out in the can. But I also just like to bring this along with the oil to a shop and allow them to dispose of this correctly. All right guys, and that's about it. That's how you do an oil change on a 2017 to 2022 Honda CRV. I hope this video helped you guys out, and if it did, please leave me a like. If you guys have any questions at all, leave them down in the comments and I'll get back to you. And if you guys are looking for more of this kind of content, then hit that subscribe button because there'll be plenty more videos coming your way. I appreciate you guys sticking through with me on this one, and I'll see you in the next one. Have a good one.